experts say there are already dozens of deaths tied to the storm, and they're expecting the actual death toll to be much higher. However, it could be at least a month until we know the severity of it all. Joining me now from Dallas, Texas, co-founder and chief strategist of GDP Advisors and financial expert Seth Denson. Seth, thank you so much for joining me. Seth, my heart goes out to all the families who had lost loved ones. And I mean, it was just so tragic to see everything that happened in Texas. And it's kind of unbelievable because this is like a storm like no other.
It really is, and I will tell you, living through it was one thing, but seeing the aftermath has been another. And it's what I think the really sad part of this whole thing, Stephanie, is that it really didn't have to be as tragic. Certainly the storm was tragic in and of itself. I'm a lifelong Texan, lived here for 40 years, and in my life I haven't experienced cold temperatures like this for at least this extended period of time. But to understand that we kind of had a similar situation about a decade ago, and studies done on how we could prevent the outages that we saw, and unfortunately we just didn't do it. I hope we'll learn from these lessons because the tragedy and the fallout didn't have to happen.
Yeah. So are you back to normal over at your house? Will you be filing insurance claims?
Probably a little bit. We lost some pipes at our house. And, fortunately, we didn't have as much of a power outage as a lot of other folks did, so we didn't lose as much. We're on the low end of the list in that we were able to kind of isolate the issue, so we're back to having water.
Yeah. Well, I saw you were doing like Skype hits, so I know that you had some power over at your house. Were you one of those who had to boil water?
We weren't, thank goodness, but that wasn't far removed from us. Again, when the power lines go down or the power grids go off, the water treatment plants went off. And then when you had mains break, you now had contaminated water. And actually still, even today, many parts of our state are still under mandatory boiling.
Yeah, it's such a mess. And everything that happened in Texas is like not just going to stay in Texas. Americans across the country are going to feel some pain from what happened there.
Yeah, so you've got effectively Texas in and of itself is the 9th largest economy in the world. And we supply the vast majority of the United States oil supply. And so all of these things went offline. We were down 3 to 4 million barrels of oil a day. That's going to mean increased cost and fuel prices across the country coming up. It's going to mean all those goods and services that come out of Texas are going to create inflation. And not to mention insurance claims. This is going to be estimated a $50 billion storm when you factor in not just Texas, but other states that were hit by this storm. That's going to impact insurance premiums across the country.
Yeah. Now, I'll shift gears here. So obviously during the pandemic, there is a difference on consumer demand, and apparently consumer demand is snapping back, but factories can't keep up. And I've heard this from different types of businesses from all over the place who say they don't have enough supply.
Well, that's right. This is called the bullwhip effect. And what happens is when you shut off an economy, you can't just flip the light switch and expect it to come back on. Amazingly enough, cars are awesome, and they're called assembly plants for a reason. That's where they get assembled. That doesn't necessarily mean that's where everything gets manufactured. You have a long process, and I know, Stephanie, you and I have talked about this before, in that when you're talking about general goods, you have the mining process, right? Then you have the production process, and then you have the distribution, the transportation, the delivery. All of these things have to happen before the goods and services come out. So what's happening right now is Americans are getting stimulus checks, and they're sitting at home because they can't go out in many parts of the country and use that money, so they're wanting to spend the money. Well, they can't because the stuff isn't there. This is going to lead to inflation across the board unintentionally.
Yikes. Well, all good points. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you.